All right, I'm now on page 252. What are two kinds of tidal ranges? Tides are due to tidal force, the difference between the force. Because the moon is so much closer to Earth than the sun is, the moon's tidal force is greater than the sun's tidal force. The moon's effect on tides is twice as strong as the sun's effect. The combined gravitational effect of the sun and the moon on Earth result in different tidal ranges. A tidal range is the difference between the levels of ocean water at high tide and low tide. Tidal range depends on the position of the sun and the moon relative to Earth. All right, under the red heading that says spring tides, the largest tidal range. Tides that have the largest daily tidal range are called spring tides. Spring tides happen when the sun, the moon, and the Earth form a straight line. So spring tides happen when the moon is between the sun and the Earth and when the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth, as shown in the illustrations below. In other words, spring tides happen during new moon and full moon phases, or about every 14 days. During these times, the gravitational effects of the sun and moon add together, causing one pair of very large tidal bulges. Spring tides have nothing to do with the season of spring. Okay, please do not think that spring tides occur in the spring. They're called spring tides because, I don't know, I guess it has to do with the whole bounciness, things that are they're stretched and bounce or whatever. Anyway, spring tides are tides that have the largest daily tidal ranges, and they occur during new and full moon when everything is lined up in a straight line. Okay, going to page 253. Red heading, neap tides, the smallest tidal range. Tides that have the smallest daily tidal range are neap tides. Neap tides happen when the sun, Earth, and the moon form a 90-degree angle as shown in the illustrations below. During a neap tide, the gravitational effects of the sun and the moon on Earth do not add together as they do during spring tides. Neap tides occur halfway between spring tides during the first and third quarter phases of the moon. At these times, the sun and the moon cause two pairs of smaller tidal bulges. Okay. If you look back to page 252, there's kind of a yellowish caption for the two pictures that they gave you. During spring tides, the tidal force of the sun on Earth adds to the tidal force of the moon, and so the tidal range increases. On page 253, during neap tides, the gravitational effects of the sun and the moon on Earth do not add together. The tidal range decreases, in other words. Okay? Okay, so I went back and I highlighted that tides are due to the tidal force, which is the difference between the force of gravity on one side of the Earth and the other side of Earth. I also underlined the sentence that says, because the moon is so much closer to the Earth than the sun is, the moon's tidal force is greater than the sun's tidal force. A tidal range is the difference between the levels of ocean water at high tide and low tide. Tidal range depends on the positions of the sun and the moon relative to Earth. Just like when you calculate range for math, range is like the highest number minus the lowest number. High tide would be your high number, low tide would be your low number. You just subtract the two. Okay, under spring tides. Tides that have the largest daily tidal range are spring tides. Spring tides happen when the sun, the moon, and the Earth form a straight line. Spring tides happen during the new moon and full moon phases, or about every 14 days. And it's really important that you realize that spring tides have nothing to do with the season of spring. Okay. If you notice in the illustration at the bottom, the little yellow is the tidal force due to the moon, due to the sun. The blue is the tidal force due to the moon. And during spring tides, they're both on the same sides of Earth, so they kind of add together. Okay, that would be new moon and full moon. On page 253, neap tides, the smallest tidal range. Tides that have the smallest daily tidal range are neap tides. Neap tides happen when the sun, Earth, and the moon form a 90-degree angle. So neap tides occur halfway between spring tides. Neap tides occur during the first quarter and third quarter phases of the moon. And if you'll notice in the illustrations, sun, Earth, and moon form a 90-degree angle. 90 and neap Sun, Earth, Moon, 90-degree angle. Okay, and you notice that the yellow tidal force due to the Sun and the blue tidal force due to the Moon are not adding together anymore. They're not on the same side of Earth. By the way, when you have waxing crescent moons, waxing gibbous moons, waning gibbous, waning crescent moons, yes, we still can calculate a tidal range for those days, but there's no special name for those tidal ranges. So all we have is spring tides during new and full moon, and we have neap tides during first and last quarter moons. The rest of them, you can still calculate the tidal range, like I said, but there's not a special name for those.